Great, thank you. Honored Ambassador, dear President, dear fellow Ramesh Chand, and distinguished guests. My name is Edward Huijbens, and I am Professor of Geography and Chair of the Cultural Geography Group at Wageningen University and Research. Now, admittedly, I am there somewhat out of my element, speaking about superfoods, and let alone that of millet. I am no particular expert on agriculture or genetics of agriculture or food production per se. And I don't maybe have not much to add when it comes to that perspective. But if, however, we look at millets and the cultivations as expressions of the intimate relation between people and the land, I do believe I have something worthwhile to contribute. In my previous years, before coming here to Wageningen, I was actually engaged in the promotion of Nordic cuisine, which I got thinking about when I listened to my colleague Professor Chand. I was thinking how that was actually a project for decades. And I remember a distinctive event in the Faroe Islands where we experimented with some of this Nordic food. Indeed, hearty heritage food, which has now become world famous, some of the best restaurants in the world on that cuisine. So I got thinking, hey, millets, here we are. Now, back to my talk a little bit. Oh, hello. Where did this go? Oh, that's a bit of a mix, isn't it? Now, here we go. Oh my word. I won't talk about speculative cartography, don't worry. I will talk about this, however. Now, this university has as its motto to explore the potential of nature to improve the quality of life. The intimate relation just mentioned is here very much present. That which is termed nature, whatever that may be, has the potential to improve people's quality of life. But then I will claim, this potential fundamentally resides in the ways in which we choose to relate to nature and how nature affords this relation to us in turn. This is what I've termed in my own work, developing earthly attachments. And I call for us to cultivate and develop these in my book, not least in our current times of climate crisis and biodiversity collapse. My discipline, cultural geography, is very much rooted in the soil and the land. One of the founding fathers of the discipline was an American geographer called Carl Sauer, here depicted. He developed considerable expertise on the cultures and climates of Mexico through long-lasting, painstaking fieldwork wherein he gauged the personality of the landscape. And this is a personality which was most clearly expressed in the presence of corn, or maize. And its multiple varieties in the country, which depended on slope, altitude, humidity, soil conditions, and a range of physical factors, which all got translated into the cultural practices of subsistence farming, making each place special and unique. With his recognition in the 1940s, Sauer argued that when it came to emerging modern agricultural practices, he quote, "We are doing too much line breeding and too little selection of hopeful diversity." Now Sauer, he features in the science journalistic account of Charles C. Mann entitled Of Wizards and Prophets. Therein, Mann is focusing on two 20th century scientists, Norman E. Borlaug and William Watt. The book explains how their ideas shaped and grounded much of the current debate around environmental conservation, nature protection, and climate change. In other words, the research and writing of the two contributed to shaping the current duel between those bent on progress and technological fixes, the wizards, and those actually more vitalistic, plural, allowing life to take its course and humanity to adapt itself to the course of life, the prophets. Charles C. Mann recounts how Sauer's insights on the diversity of corn and the complex personality of the Mexican landscape was brought to the attention of the Rockefeller Foundation. Now they were keen to fund research in Mexico on how to improve the lot of the Mexican peasant in the 1940s. But the government official in Mexico, they pointed to the vast stretches of rolling cornfields in Iowa and asked why the US was bent on cultivating diversity and complexity in Mexico, whilst of course having these lucrative monocultures in the Midwest. Needless to say, Sauer's insights on hopeful diversity didn't gain much traction. And in Mexico, the wizard, Norman Borlaug, ruled the day with extensive and methodological approach to cross-breeding species focusing purely on yields within the geographical parameters of the region. Borlaug thereby intensified the emerging paths of exploitative agricultural practices dating from the plantations of colonization. The emerging green revolution that we all know is recognized by now for its contributions to depleted soils, oceans, dead zones, through overuse of fertilizers, wreaking havoc of life and birds and insects and all that. And we just learned now how it's impacting the nutritional state in India with this focus on wheat, maize and rice. Now indeed, how we relate to the land matters. Today we are all familiar with the challenges facing humanity, although that is of course a humanity which is highly differentiated. The Earth, here depicted as a vehicle, is heading for uncertain future, leaving the stable conditions of the last 12,000 years, called the Holocene, in geological parlance, and entering an era termed the Anthropocene. Now what fundamentally characterizes that future is uncertainty, but also a recognition that the planet we live on is being fundamentally one of our making. One Earth, one family, one future, indeed. With the looming catastrophes of climate change, we realize it matters what we do. What we do transforms the planet and the very conditions for the affordances that nature gives us and we can relate to and the land we inhabit. Now this has prompted my fellow scholars to call us down to earth. In the words of Bruno Latour, while observing with anguish that the universal condition today entails living in the ruins of modernization, groping for a dwelling place. The techno-fixes of war, here labelled modernization, are in ruins, or leading to ruins, or at least some nutritional deficiencies. And the realization is leading us to grope around in a darkness of uncertainty for a dwelling place. To find one, David Abrams claims we must accept the invitation of gravity and settle back into the land, its political and economic structures diversified into the varied contours and rhythms of a more than human earth. Our political and economic structures to settle into the diverse contours of a more than human earth. David Abrams here is in fact asking us and our institutions to become millet. We should take on the rhythms and contours of the millet itself. To indeed cultivate the hopeful diversity Sauer proposed. Now indeed we are what we eat, we all know that. But it's more than that. David Abrams goes so far as to claim that the human intellect, our very intellect, is rooted in and secretly borne by our forgotten contact with the multiple non-human shapes that surround us. Millet as our intelligence, a capacity for meaning making. The image here depicted conveys that our bodies are sort of an open circuit that completes itself only in things, in others, in the encompassing earth. This image is an artistic rendering of the notion of the holobiont from biology, which biology refers to as a collection of closely associated species that have complex interactions, such as plant species or members of a microbiome. In this sense, the millet becomes our means for earthly attachments. It is the expression of the becomings of the earth and society together, which might then help us probe the rich diversity murmuring within the soil and the earth itself. What could millet become, through, by, and with us, into the future? I would imagine a very pertinent question to the International Year of Millets. But at the same time, millet has been around for thousands of years, as neatly documented by Professor Chan, 4,500 BC in India, if I noted correctly. Humans, so it's not only on the subcontinent, but even in Africa and in the Ukraine, as we heard. So there is already a lot here to learn from and relate to the future, as means of relating and developing these earthly attachments. One of our responsibilities as human people is to find ways to enter into reciprocity with the more than human world. And we can do so through gratitude, ceremony, through land stewardship, science, art, and the everyday acts of practical reverence. Here speaks Robin Wall Kimmerer, a US-based ecologist with indigenous background, trying to diverse the gaze of science to that of the teaching of plants. And note the terms: reverence, gratitude, ceremony, art. Let that sink in when thinking about superfoods. What are we talking about, and how can we relate to it? Now here comes an admission of mine. I inadvertently stole the title of my talk. When Kalyan here asked me to address you and asked me for a title, I thought immediately, mingling with millets. I have, of course, been prone to prose, and alliteration has an immediate appeal, of course, so I was thinking that must be cool. But I also wanted to convey a sense of what I've tried to state above in developing birthing attachment. Mingling has a particular egalitarian overtones. It's a kind of respectful, somewhat passive, opening up to what may come, allowing for the affordances presented to us what is out there. However, in times of AI, chatbots, and Google, of course, an academic cannot dare an original thought without consulting our collective intelligence, mediated through the moguls of Silicon Valley. So there I did, and indeed here it was, mingling with millets. The Nirman Initiative for Sustainable Development, based in Odisha, India, had published a booklet with that very name. The aim of the booklet is to restore the millet as a source of nutrition and food, as we just learned, by providing guidance as to how it can be prepared or used to prepare some of the traditional dishes in Indian cuisine. And this booklet is directly targeted at the tribals in the region, in Odisha. So how to make the pakoda, the idli, the puri, the halva, the roti, and biryani, all of it, all with millet and its local varieties. Now if that doesn't make you mouth water, very quick, I can go back. So it's all right. These dishes, varying in their complexity and content, are to me ways of alchemizing the mundane of millet into majesty. Wrapped together in these dishes is the depth of time through culture and nature, through particular means of production, which are very much grounded on and off this earth. The terroir at the center of this image is used in wine production. You may have heard it in France. Nice terroir. All right. But, of course, it very explicitly refers to the earth. Terra, the Latin root of the terroir, is the rim that's there at the center. So mingling with the hopeful diversity of millet is a potential dwelling place for us amidst the ruins of our modernizing aspiration. A down-to-earth mentality we can adopt as we face an uncertain future in the Anthropocene. If we focus on the millet, its rhythms and contours, and allow that to guide us, we can define a territory, a dwelling place, a living territory, bringing together a range of living spaces into their layers of life. Oh boy, haha, that's where speculative cartography was supposed to come in. Never mind, it's already done. My discipline is indeed all about making maps. And here, focused on the rhythms and contours of millet, we can create speculative maps of the future that can be drawn where we take serious what a millet can do. It is indeed in the face of the intractable challenges of climate change, I urge for this restoring of the millet and focus on its diversity. Not its lean blind reading, but diversity. Echoing sound. I most certainly appreciate that this day is becoming hosted by the Indian Embassy. And I recently visited India in November last year for the second time, and there I learned something interesting after reading this book, The Great Indian Novel. One strength of the Indian mind is that it knows some problems cannot be resolved, and it learns to make the best of them. That is the Indian answer to the insuperable difficulty. One does not fight against that by which one is certain to be overwhelmed, but one finds the best way for oneself to live with it. This is our national aesthetic. Without it, India, as we know, could not survive. These are the words of course, Tagore, the author of the Great Indian Novel, which I picked up at Delhi Airport and read recently. I take it at face value. Most of you know better probably. Mingling with millets in the face of climate change, appreciating its diversity and what it affords us with reverence and gratitude is the way I suggest. To me, it is then merely about placing the design question on each of our shoulders as to what assemblages to associate with and to extricate from. The problem of life is the problem of design, and this problematization averts our attention sideways. We look at the causality as emergent, and we recognize the alien quality of our own flesh. Stop looking like God down to earth, let's become with the earth, and again look sideways at the millet field. We are what we eat, remember. But so much more than merely for energy and food. Our very earthly attachment are expressed through the foods we prepare and the materials we use there. Let us make sure we cultivate hopeful diversity and the earthly attachments afforded to us by the super quality of the grain we call millet. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Huijbens, for a completely